Good afternoon, everyone. This is Brad Weber. Welcome to Simply Local San Diego. I'm Brad Weber with Local Umbrella Media, and we're here at the beautiful IQ Podcast Studios in warm Coronado, California. It's really warm in San Diego, and it's even warm in Coronado today, but still beautiful as always. So my special guest today is Miss Jennifer Coburn, here in San Diego, an accomplished journalist, which I know all about because she writes some articles for our newspapers and magazines, and an accomplished author. And she has a new book out called Cradles of the Reich. Thank you very much, Jennifer, for being with me today on
Well,
short notice.
thank you so much for having me, Brad.
Well, I've known you for quite some time. I can't remember how long, but like I said, how long?
20 years.
20 years. Yes,
Yeah,
I don't know
20
if
years.
that's true, but maybe it is. I'm not admitting to that. But anyway, it's been, you're a wonderful person and a joy to be around, but you're also really a great writer. And I know you've had books in the past. Maybe we'll talk about those, but let's talk about this book. It's Cradles of the Reich. It's being released in October. And I will say before we start anything, I ordered a copy and I gave it to my wife, and I think she stayed up all night. Maybe it was her day off, but anyway, she finished it. I couldn't believe it. The next day she told me that book was amazing. I love that book. Tell Jen. So she doesn't even know you, so it wasn't even because she had to say that, but it's a great book. So tell us about the book and tell us about your background and what caused you to write this book in particular.
Wow, thank you so much. And I'm really flattered that your wife enjoyed it. I was able to send you an advanced reader copy. So when you say you ordered it, I just don't want people to think that they can do that today, although they are certainly welcome to pre-order the book, and they'll have it in their hands on October 11th, which is when the book will be released. Right. So the book is it's a historical novel called Cradles of the Reich, and it's about three very different German women who meet at a Nazi Lebensborn breeding program. And it was called the Lebensborn Society, and the program was the goal of the program was to create 2 million racially valuable babies for the Reich. And the way the Nazis did this was threefold. One, they arranged sexual liaisons between German women and SS officers. Two, they set up maternity homes for pregnant German women, mostly who were unwed. And three, when the war started in 1939, the Nazis kidnapped blonde hair, blue-eyed children from countries that they invaded. Wow. And this program operated in secret for 10 years. And at the end of that 10-year period, the program had created 20,000 babies and kidnapped 200,000 children.
Wow. So it started in 1939, ended in 49 after the war?
The war ended in 45. Right. And the Nazi Lebensborn program ended with the war. Okay. And it was launched in 1935 by Heinrich Himmler, who was Adolf Hitler's number 2 man.
Got it. Wow. So this is all factual. The characters are fictional, correct? But the
three characters are fictional, and it is set in a real Nazi program. And although the characters are fictional, what I wanted to do was create 3 women who represented the faces of Gentile German citizens. We have Gundi, who is the resistor, Hilda, who is the true believer, and Irma, who is a bystander. She just wants to keep her head down and make it through the war, like a lot of Germans did. So these 3 women come together. They have conflicting needs and desires. So as you can imagine, they change the course of one another's life, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the disastrous.
Wow. So all 3 of these did they all give birth, or they all were impregnated in one way or another?
So the
Okay.
characters are the resistor Gundi. She is a 20-year-old student who is secretly a member of the resistance,
Okay.
and she is pregnant. Hilda is, our true Hitler girl, which is what the Nazis called their most loyal female members. The She is excited about being pregnant with a Nazi officer's baby. And the third character, the indifferent one, the bystander, is Nurse Irma. And she is a nurse at the home who originally feels really good about serving these girls and serving the Reich until she discovers what the program and what the Nazi party is really all about. And then she comes to a point where she's got to choose sides.
Wow. Interesting. So tell us how you got all this. I mean, it always amazes me. I've never written a book. I can't even imagine writing one. And these prolific authors that write, like Michener and Stephen King, even. I mean, they pump out books left and right. Like go to they wake up the next day and write another book almost. It's just crazy to me. I've always been amazed at what it would take to do that. So tell us about the process of writing a book. When did you start working on it? What maybe the seed of the idea of why you decided to do this particular book?
Sure. Well, thanks. Cradles of the Reich is not my first novel, but it is my debut historical novel. And before Cradles of the Reich, I had written a memoir called We'll Always Have Paris, which followed my daughter and me around 12 cities in Europe. And before that, I wrote 6 contemporary women's novels. So writing about the Nazis, not the next natural step in my writing career, but I could not stop thinking about this program once I learned about it. I had so many questions like, how did the program operate? How were the girls chosen? And why? Why would a woman have sex with a man she had never met just to have a child for Hitler? And then these children became property of the Reich and they were placed for adoption with what Nazis considered good German families.
Wow.
So I didn't want to write a historical novel. I wanted to read one. And what I found was that there were many nonfiction books about the Lebensborn program, but no novels.
Hmm.
So I wrote the book that I wanted to read with a book club.
Great. I've never heard of it, and I don't know how hidden it is or obscure it is. You say books have been written about it, but it's certainly not. I don't think it's out there for. If you ask 100 people if they've heard of it, I'm not sure how many would say yes. But
Well, very few, because I did ask about 100 people. When I heard about this program, I was fascinated. I just couldn't stop thinking about the fact that this program was in this program was launched at the same time as the Holocaust.
yeah,
So here we have Nazis destroying life and then also setting up these homes to create life. And while they are opposite sides of the same coin, they are from the same motivation of creating this master race, which is so warped and so evil. And also the two facets of this era were so interrelated, and I had to dig in. So it was very hidden.
that's amazing. When I forgot what I was going to ask you, Jen. Gosh darn it. Sarah just sent me a
You
note.
were saying I don't know. You were saying how much your wife loved the book.
Oh no, we just got a note. Well, this is live, and we just got
Oh,
Sandra Scheller, who put up the Holocaust Museum, is watching.
oh,
Her
hi.
mother is a Holocaust survivor. So
Mhm.
thank you, Sandra, so much for watching today.
Thank
So
you, Sandra.
that's why I
So
lost my train of thought.
yeah, so Sandra, one thing I want to talk about is, my mother. We're a Jewish family, and one of the reasons that I was inspired to write this book is I grew up in a Jewish family from New York, and my father, who was born in 1936, their great fear in that family was Adolf Hitler coming to the United States and our family being imprisoned
Yeah.
and murdered,
Right.
as 6 million were in Europe. So my family had a plan, and the plan was my father was to be adopted by the German family who lived downstairs in their two-family home. My Aunt Bernice was going to be taken in by a convent upstate that had room for 9 Gentile passing girls. And my Aunt Rita had polio, so she walked with a limp, and there was no hope for her. Even if righteous Gentiles and even if a convent wanted to help her, she was sadly a lost cause for saving. So my father was haunted by this throughout his whole life, and in turn passed that trauma on to me. And I have always been deeply, deeply moved by the stories of Holocaust survivors and victims, and wanted to add to the conversation by exploring how a country, a civilized nation like Germany, how they were seduced by a madman and became a cult of hate. Like, how does this happen?
Yeah.
So my mom called me and she said, "You're writing a story, and the characters are non-Jewish Germans. Why would you center their voices?" And it's not that I'm centering their voices. I wanted to explore the evils of anti-Semitism by really digging into this program and seeing how this happens. How does this, how does a country lose its mind?
Yeah. Well, a few things. I mean, we weren't that far from being, that those were fears that were real. I mean, that very easily could have happened. The war could have
Oh,
gone the other way, and I think people, certainly young people, aren't reminded of this enough. I mean, there's people that don't even, you ask them what the Holocaust is, and they don't even know it. So, I mean, hopefully this will help a little bit. Hopefully this book finds its way into schools and things like that, so it can re-enlighten the historical fact that this really happened. How amazingly, what you just said, how can human beings turn so purely evil from the basis of what we all have? We're all imperfect, but it's just such an extreme. And the Holocaust Museum, I've been there in DC, and it's incredible when you go through that to see kind of
so Sandra, is she tuning in from the Holocaust Museum, the one in Chula Vista, or in Washington, or another?
Chula Vista, the
We have
Chula Vista one. Yes.
Oh, wonderful! I'm so glad you're
Yeah.
here.
What's that?
Hi.
I,
Hi, Jennifer. This is
Hi.
producer Sarah. I just wanted to butt in a little bit here because, yes, they closed down the Holocaust Museum in Chula Vista. It closed down in August. I think it was the last day of August. But Sandra was writing some things here. She says it started with propaganda and the youth, and but she's on here. She's like, we're not imperfect, but we are unique. I know you can't see some of her remarks, so I thought I'd
That's
hop
okay.
in and let you know what's going on. But yeah, Sandra is a curator for the Chula Vista Holocaust Museum.
Well, Sandra, I'm so glad that you tuned in, and you are so right. It did start with the propaganda. One of the most surprising things that I found in doing my research about this era was just how deep the propaganda went. I mean, we all know about the posters and the propaganda films and and the books that they put out. What I had no idea about, Sandra, you probably do, but maybe some of our other listeners had not known or do not know that the Nazis created a family board game, or actually several family board games, but the one that comes to mind is called Judenraus. And that means Jews out. So the whole family would gather around for a game night to play a game where the object is to run 6 Jewish people off to Palestine. And we all know that there were adult books, but there were children's books. There was one called Der Gilfpilz. There was another one called Fear No Fox, or something about a fox. But anyway, Der Gilfpilz is the poisonous mushroom. And that's a book for little kids that teaches them that Jewish people may look harmless, but make no mistake, we are poison to the Volk.
Wow.
And that is verbatim from the book. They are poison to the Volk. So children, from the minute they could interact, actually before they could interact, they had this naming ceremony when the children were weeks old. And they would place the children on this little pillow, and a Nazi officer would take his sword from his scabbard, place the tip of the sword on the infant's belly, and initiate him or her into the Nazi party. So from before you could even understand what was going on in your world, you were indoctrinated into the Nazi party. And then the stories that you heard were about how to fear the Jews, and games that you played were anti-Semitic. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Sandra. It was deep anti-Semitism.
Yeah,
She said she knows about the game, The Poisonous Mushroom.
Well, the game is Judenraus, and the book is The Poisonous Mushroom. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so she knows about that. I imagine she does, especially as a child of a Holocaust survivor, and working at the museum. I'm sure you will read this book, and much of it will be familiar to you. I don't know if you know Marshall Wallner. If you want to just give a thumbs up or thumbs down, if you know Marshall Wallner, who's an educator here in San Diego, a Holocaust educator, and she read the book, and there was nothing that I could teach her, but she said that the research was really well done, and that my historical accuracy was on point. So I considered that a success.
congrats.
She says she loves Marcus. And
Marsha.
Marsha. Okay, Marsha. Yeah, she wrote it.
Marsha.
It was Marsha. And she said, from the book, it says, "Daddy, when I grow up, I will never live next to a Jew."
Wow.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Sandra, we're going to make sure you get a copy of this book, because I think we have a fan already.
Yes.
It sounds
Wait,
like.
Sandra, do you have a copy of the Der Gilfpilz? I'm sorry. Hey, why don't you just put Sandra on the line? We would like
I
to
wish
talk.
we could. Yeah.
I'm sorry. You know what? When we're
Log her in.
offline, I have been searching high and low for Der Gilfpilz.
She said yes, she has it.
She has it. So I'll tell you what, we're going to connect, Sandra, we're going to connect you with Jennifer, and you guys, we're going to connect the two of you so you can share
Thank you.
stories and antidotes and actual things that the other doesn't have. You're going to trade. So
Fantastic.
anyway, so
right.
The whole thing's incredible. I mean, I grew up in a small town. I shouldn't even put this in this context, but I do know what growing up and only hearing, not being exposed to other ideas and things like that. So when you grew up in Germany in those years, the youth were brought up and they were taught one thing, and you only know what you've learned, right? And what you've experienced and what you see. We're kind of, we have some of that stuff going on right now where people listen to what their one channel that they want to hear, and social media and things keep feeding them that stuff. So it tears us all apart, and that's happening every day, I think, now. But this is kind of the perfect example of how bad that can really go and how bad that can really be, because it's just tragic and it's amazing, but it's, now that we see it's kind of, I can understand how it could happen with propaganda. Well done.
Well, and it happens slowly and methodically. I think a lot of people believe, that Hitler was elected, not democratically elected, and that the next day he opened concentration camps.
Right.
That is not how this happened. I mean, Adolf Hitler started with a failed insurrection in 1923 called the Beer Hall Putsch, and came into power in 1933, became the Führer in 1934. And yes, there were concentration camps, but the mass genocide did not really start until late 40, 41. There was certainly death and there was certainly murder, but the gas chambers and the mass genocide didn't happen until later. So this is a long drawn out process, and it's easy to people who are in it didn't see it creeping up on them.
Right. Till it was too late. Yeah, exactly. And that can happen. So how long when did you start researching this book? Did you go to Germany then? Tell us about, what it takes to complete something like this.
Well, I went to Germany. I've been to Germany, and one of the things that really touched me there in Germany was how remorseful they seem, how they require Holocaust studies to be part of the school curriculum.
Right.
They don't shy away from their past, their history. There are monuments to the victims, not the perpetrators, everywhere in Germany. And people, I was really moved when I saw a 6 foot tall, blonde hair, blue eye. I mean, the most Aryan person you could ever imagine. And he was at a Holocaust memorial, one of the many, just absolutely sobbing for the sins of his grandfather. And it was very moving and touching to see that they really take this so seriously, which is not to say there's not anti-Semitism or Nazism in Germany. There
Yeah, I was
certainly
just going to
is.
say I've read
But
recently about, some groups popping up and
yeah, no, it's not that they were popping up. They've always been there, and we're hearing about them more and more, or they are more active than they once were. They're feeling emboldened by the current political climate. But the greater culture is taking responsibility, paying reparations, putting up the monuments to the victims,
Right.
and making sure that this never happens again.
That's good to hear. Really good to hear, actually, because I wasn't aware of that. So that's
yeah. So that was just the question about have you been to Germany? What did I do to research this? A lot of reading, a lot of watching propaganda films and documentaries. But the part that I really enjoyed the most was talking to subject matter experts who either had been there or had studied this intensely. Like I must have driven crazy this professor of propaganda. His name is Dr. Randall Bytwerk, and he was an amazing wealth of information about the propaganda campaigns, as well as the cultural details. I met someone in our community who was a Gentile German boy living in Berlin during the pogroms of 1938 that the Nazis called Kristallnacht. And he was there, and he asked his father, why is there all this glass on the street? Why are there Hakenkreuz, swastikas spray painted on the windows next to our shop? And he really, I really appreciated Rolf because he did not revise his own history. He was a member of the Deutsche Jungen, which is the baby arm of the Hitler Youth. Okay. And he didn't recast himself as the 7-year-old leader of the youth resistance movement. He told me that he was in the Hitler Youth because he was afraid of Jews, when he really thought Jewish people wanted to kill him. And when he joined, he wanted to protect Germans from Jewish people. And I really found that candid discussion very helpful in crafting my characters who were Nazi sympathizers or indifferent to the plight of the Jews.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. Yeah. By the way, this is, and we're going to, at the end of this podcast, we're going to tell people how you get the book. I suggest you do. It's amazing. I'm more interested now than I've ever been. So I was watching Joe Rogan the other day, who I watch from time to time, but he was talking about Hitler. There's a bunch of, I think it's Argentina or somewhere in South America. Have you heard that where Hitler supposedly actually got away, didn't really commit suicide, and all these German officers, Nazi officers, ended up going to South America, and you go down there and there's complete towns and cities that are all German. Have you heard that? Is that a wild
story? It sounds like plenty of Nazi officers did escape to South
Yeah.
America, sadly. Many
Okay.
were brought to justice by Nazi hunters well into the 60s, I think even early 70s, some Nazi. Actually, really recently, there was an 89-year-old German guard who was
Right.
brought to justice. And I, even if one Nazi officer got away, it's too many.
Yeah.
But I'm
I'll look more deeply into that because it was like whole, they formed generational, they've multiplied many times now, and there's big communities, and they're all just, there's no remorse, there's no anything down there. So I'm just saying I've heard it. I don't know if it's fact.
It's
Sandy
interesting
said
that
you're correct.
you say that about. I'm sorry, what was that?
Sandy said I'm correct, so she knows more about that. So when you guys connect, you can talk about that more.
So it's interesting that you say that they had no remorse, because one of the characters in my book is I try to, as much as possible, use the names of real Nazis, because I want to call them out. I want to put names to them. There's even one little reference when Gundi says she was bullied in elementary school, or primary school as they called it. She was bullied by a girl. Oh gosh, the name is escaping me, but Elizabeth Volkenroth. And if you look up Elizabeth Volkenroth, that's a real Nazi guard who was born at the very same time. But a more central character is Reichsfrauenführerin Gertrude Schultz Klink, who was the real leader of the Women's League. So I have her in the book, and she sadly got to live until her well into her 90s, and said until the very end that she feels she did nothing wrong and she had no regrets. So that is unfortunate and common. And I fully support the Nazi hunters who go after Nazi officers. And I say Nazi officers, but I mean even staff members, even minor players in the Nazi party. I think it is never too late to have justice for the victims.
Yeah, it's one thing to be a kid and be taught that from birth, but once you get a certain point,
my friend, and I do consider Rolf a friend. He was 7 years old. He did not perpetrate any violence. He went to camp, and he had anti-Semitic beliefs, which he is now extremely repentant for, but he did not perpetrate any violence. So I would not consider him somebody worthy of going after. But anybody who was involved with violence or roundups or even instigated, called for violence.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm definitely going to dig in. We're going to promote this book. We're going to do a story about Jen in our next issue of our newspaper. So, and about the book, I'm looking forward to you getting out, not only here in San Diego, but you have a book tour. Tell us about the tour coming up. Aren't you going?
Yeah,
right?
I'm so happy to tell you about the tour. I want to just say one thing. In my book and on my website, there is, in the book, it's an author's note. And on my website, jennifercoburn.com, there is the story behind the story. And that goes into much greater detail about how I did the research, because we really just scratched the surface today. But I talked to a lot of experts. I had the German author Bernhard Schlink read every single page of this book to make sure that the linguistic and cultural details were accurate. And there were so many subject matter experts that I want to make sure I acknowledge properly. So the ones I named today, those are a few, but there were so many that deserve my eternal gratitude for taking the time to help me get this important story right. And when I say the important story, I don't mean my story is so important, but the story of the Lebensborn program is really important that the world know about, so that we can see the red flags when they happen, even here. So my
Exactly.
book tour, I'm super excited about. The book comes out on October 11th. People can pre-order the book now on their through their favorite independent bookseller, through Adventures by the Book. In San Diego, I'm having 6 events before the book even comes out. And you can see the whole schedule on jennifercoburn.com. There's an events tab. And then I'm heading to 15 states because I'm a glutton for I was going to say punishment, but I really don't mean it as punishment.
Oh,
It's a privilege to get out there and meet the readers of books. The traveling isn't that fun, but the
that's
interacting and engaging with readers is a pure delight. Hearing what they thought, what stood out to them. It's really interesting to hear what kind of things really struck a nerve with people, and I just really look forward to it.
that's great. Can we tell people where the first event is, and so they can?
Yeah, well, let's say my main event, my launch party, is going to be on October 6th, 6:30 to 8:30 at the Coronado Public Library in the Wynn Room.
Oh, great.
And then,
Right here in
oh,
town.
sorry, I know you said the first, but I'm going to push a little bit and say, and then the next day I'm having a fancy schmancy luncheon through Adventures by the Books at the Southwestern Yacht Club. And that's a ticketed event, but you will get a beautiful lunch and a copy of the book for your ticket price.
Right. You can find all about jennifercoburn.com, correct?
Right, right. Thank you.
Great. Well, Jennifer Coburn, it's Cradles of the Reich. This is the book. It's a beautiful book. I suggest you read it. It's a story that needs to be told. We don't want to forget history because there's lots of lessons there. And thanks for being here. I look
Hey,
forward
thanks
to
for having me.
following you across the country as you do these book notes and seeing you hopefully on the bestseller list.
Well, if you're on Instagram, you will be following me around the country because I am, as you may know, a bit of a social media addict. And I don't use that term lightly. It's an addiction.
Great.
But I thank you for having me on the show, and from your lips to God's ears with the bestseller list. I just hope that people enjoy the book and that I have done justice to this very important unknown chapter of history.
Well, I'm highly confident that part's going to happen for sure. So we'll see how much further it goes. But thanks for being with us, Jennifer. Always great to see you and talk to you. And your
Great to see
enthusiasm
you.
for this is amazing. And thanks for watching. That's our show today. I do want to thank our sponsors, Attorney King, of course, Aquan Casino, IB Fitness, and today, La Tip of La Jolla. Special shout out. Thanks, Jennifer Coburn. That's our show. We'll see you next time.
Bye.